Well, welcome to Raven Site.
Well, thank you. James Conkle, director of the Raven Site. It's a pleasure and we're impressed, and thank you for inviting us. And we're looking forward to it.
Okay, this is Jeff Brown, archaeologist on the site.
Jeff, pleasure
good to see you again.
You
You
bet.
bet.
One of our archaeologists.
It's been 3 years.
Jeff directs the excavations on the site. Does all of the note-taking, measuring, photography, pretty much everything up here.
Keeps me busy.
Well, that's great. If the fruits of your work shows in the artifacts and so forth that you brought.
We get down to the lab, we'll get a look at those. I'm going to turn the South Pueblo tour over to Jeff, and then I'll do the North Pueblo. There's two Pueblos up here. The North Pueblo was built around, well, probably earlier than 800 AD, but the earliest dates we have are 800 AD through about 1380. The South Pueblo we're going to come up on right now, that was built after 1380 and might have been occupied as late as 1550 AD. And with that, I'll let Jeff take over and show you some of the features up here, and then I'll jump in once or twice.
Great.
Well, what we have here at the South Pueblo, we have a large structure shaped like a giant U shape. The base of it runs from this fence, barbed wire fence, straight across this way. You can see a portion of a wall right over here. Continues across all the way over towards that rock pile over there. It's a giant horseshoe or a giant U-shaped Pueblo. We're not sure how many rooms we have here, but if you step up this way, I'll show you some of these that we've uncovered. This is a very late Pueblo, dates into the 1500s. People could have been living here when Coronado, the Spanish explorer, passed through this area in 1540. We're finding very late pottery called Matsaki, red on buff, Ketchipawan, Pinawa. It's amazing variety of styles of pottery we're finding here. Over 70 different styles. If you step up here, you can look down into some of these rooms. We have a series of doorways connecting these rooms. We have 5 doorways connecting 6 rooms. We believe there's a doorway right down here that we haven't cleaned up yet and stabilized. The rest of these doorways, we put a cap on the top. We have the original width, but we're not sure of the original height. We do believe these people were fairly short. We believe the present-day Zuni people are the descendants of these people, and they're still a short people. We surmise that these people were on average about 5 foot tall. Most of these rooms over here were 1 story. Back up to the right on this side, we believe these were 2 story, just given the amount of rubble that we have to remove as we excavate. That's what this large stone pile is over here. All represents former wall material. There's more rooms underfoot here that we haven't excavated yet, all across here, all the way over towards the barbed wire fence. If you step over here, you can look down into some of these rooms. Last season, towards about this time last year, in this room, room 27, we found a very rare artifact, a sandstone tablet that had painted crushed blue turquoise, yellow, white, black, and red. And we believe it probably represents some type of emergence to come forward. It's black rain clouds raining down on a keyhole-shaped doorway. And it's as rare as artifacts get. That was found on the floor in this room right here. This room over here, let me take you around the corner. You can look down into this room that was probably used as a preparation for a grinding of corn, because we found some bins. You step around this way. This is room 31, and you can see these bins here. This is how we found these. These are original. The grinding stones were found on the floor roundabout, and we placed them back inside those bins. But most likely these bins were utilized for the grinding of corn. And you'd have varying grades of metate, of grinding surfaces, so when it got down to the 3rd bin, it was probably ground very fine. Here's a firebox right down here, stone firebox. And if you look on the far edge of that wall, leaning against the wall is a hatch cover, a square sandstone hatch cover that was originally probably up on the roof here, and we found it collapsed into the room about halfway down. Here's some more metates in the corner. We found a total of 11 metates between what was on the roof originally and what was on the floor level. Now you can see this little hump right here. We believe there's more rooms in line with this one running all the way up this way. that haven't been touched yet. And if you look at that fence post over there, back this way towards the barbed wire fence, there's more rooms, probably 3 deep, and those continue on up. This room block continues up towards what we call the North Pueblo. If you look back this way, you can see a large depression. We believe this is a religious structure, a kiva, and we also have a small depression here. Might be a smaller clan kiva. Religious activities were very important to these people. If you look down here, here's a ventilator, a circular stone feature. We believe there's an opening at a lower level that opens up into this room here, and these were utilized to help circulate the air, to remove the smoke. If you step over here, I'll show you a couple more ventilators. Here's a small ventilator, somewhat like a chimney. And here's a large one right over here, supported by a small wall that was probably originally up to the edge. A little buttress wall to keep these ventilators from sloughing off and falling away. But these ventilators vent through this long wall, which is the base of the Pueblo, into rooms over here that we haven't excavated yet. There's rooms all the way across here, all the way out towards that dirt pile right over here. We're not sure how many we have, anywhere between 600 and 800 rooms. If you look over here, you can see that rubble, line of rubble running up towards that telephone pole. That's the other room block, the west room block, the arm of the U-shaped Pueblo. It's probably similar to this other arm that we see right over here. There's probably 60 to 100 rooms over there because we believe some sections were 2 stories. Did you want to add something about the symbols? We're finding very late pottery here, and James Kunkel, the director, will explain about some of those pots.
Well, there you go. The ceramic types are late, yes, and they're being debated now. There's a debate about when these date and how late. And that's one of the things, if we can find some good beam material in here, we can get some good tree ring dates in the South Pueblo. We can solve some of those mysteries about these ceramic dates. The other thing we're finding in this room block we saw with all these little doorways, those rooms were utilized by the same clan. That's why they have doorways that are contiguous. You know that space was used by one group. Well, all throughout that room block, all the symbols on the ceramics were birds. Bird this, bird that, and all of the animal bone, all the faunal material, when it was analyzed, was found to be roadrunner, dove, all kinds of strange birds. So something was going on with birds here. This bird clan or bird house, some sort of identification with various birds. The South Pueblo, I just wanted to mention, was one occupation. We haven't found any floors, below floors, or such like in the north. It looks like it was built in one fell swoop, planned community. The masonry is all very similar. And we haven't found any evidence of anything lower. In the North Pueblo, that's all we find is layer on layer on layer of habitation. We'll get up there in just a second. Is there anything else here you wanted to point out, Jeff?
Well, I'll take you on up to what we call the North Pueblo, up this way.
Been excavated and then filled back
Yes,
in?
backfilled. We commonly fill them back in to put pressure on the walls so their walls don't collapse. Short of covering the whole site in a tin roof like in Pompeii or whatever. Now this mound right here, this represents a continuation of this room block, continuing on up. Probably represents this wall, this main wall continuing on up in ruins. We're not sure how far this goes. Probably attaches itself to a much older Pueblo, the North Pueblo up here. We believe there's rooms all across the surface up here that haven't been touched yet. 25, 35 years worth of work right here.
Okay, well, we just walked up to the North Pueblo, and the North Pueblo, we had to walk up quite a hill to get here. The hill wasn't natural. The hill is the accumulation of cultural material over many, many centuries. This is room 26, and this one here. We excavated down almost 5 meters in this room. Went down about 2 meters, found a floor and a hearth. Left that hearth in place for archaeomagnetic dating. Pedestaled it, went around it, went down another meter, found another floor level. And both of those rooms had been 3-story. Went below that, found another hearth, another floor level. That room had been at least a 2-story. And in that room, there was a little bench that ran around the room. And that bench had been the foundation of a room that was there before any of those were there. So on this one spot, there had been as many as 8 or 9 rooms, levels, counting all the stories. And we won't find the rest of it until we get out and excavate out in here. The problem is when you get too deep in these rooms, now this has obviously been backfilled with several meters of material, that keeps the walls from collapse. And when we want to go deeper, we'll just dig out the backfill and we've put a visqueen down and poked holes in it so we know where that level is. But you'll find that in North Pueblo quite a bit. Rooms built on top of rooms, built on top of rooms. And this is because of all of the reoccupation of the site. Populations would live here for 60, 80 years, then most of them, not all of them, but most of them would move to greener pastures because they use up the firewood, hunt off the game. But then they'd come back. After a few generations, the game would come back, the firewood would grow back, and the population would again increase. And this went on for many, many centuries. I want to show you some of the walls on top of walls over here. This is room 30, and what we wanted to do, which we didn't achieve, we wanted to open up a small area and excavate all the way to sterile, because we've never found sterile. We keep hitting features, and we have never found an area that we can get all the way down and find the bottom. That's why we don't really know how old this place is. We have dates as early as 800, but there's stuff below those. So we opened up a 2 meter by 3 meter area along this known wall. And we dropped down, and sure enough, we found a hearth, which is being stabilized or being protected now for archaeomagnetic dating, and another wall and a floor. So now, before we can cut below this floor, we have to finish this room at this level. And the interesting thing that happened in this room was abandoned, but people still lived around it. The neighbors still lived over here, and the neighbors still lived over here. Because what they did is the woman would get up in the morning, assumably female would get up in the morning, sweep up her hearth, she'd climb up on top of her flat roof, walk next door, and throw it in this empty room. And the beams had been removed and used someplace else. And you can see these ash lenses in here along this wall. There's all these different ash lenses. These are accumulation. Here's a little turkey bone sticking out. Some more bones. These are from the family meal. And these trash middens are a lot of fun because people lose things in the trash. They lose beads and points, etc. And we can date each one of these lenses as we profile this room over, and then we'll also learn what happened to the floor, what happened when this room was occupied. And we'll cut down through this and find other rooms below other rooms below other rooms. Climb back out of here. But first they have to terrace off this overburden, and it takes quite a while. They found the east wall already, but it curves. Curves in, so I don't know what's going on. I think there's a kiva underneath these rooms. I think they built on top of a kiva. Because if you look over here by this really fine banded masonry, and in this section, there are 2 walls that curve in here with a little tunnel. We'll go around and look at the tunnel in a second. But there's buildings on top of buildings on top of buildings, walls on top of trash middens, all these reoccupations of the site. There are 2 little tunnels. You'll have to come around this way to see them. There's 2 little tunnels that go back, and then beyond the second tunnel, there's a tube that drops down like a well, down a couple of meters, and probably deeper than that. I don't know how we'll ever excavate it. We'll have to get some midgets with ropes, I think, to lower them down there. But they're going to terrace off the overburden, stabilize every feature we have, every feature we expose, we stabilize for the future. So it's very tricky to get to the lower levels. We haven't not yet achieved that in this part of the Pueblo. They're working on the east wall now. We had to take a look at the excavation going on. Kimber just found a nice little point. And I wish I knew what it was made out of, but I was told once, but I've forgotten what it's called. It's a very unique shirt of some kind. Okay. This is the fun part, right?
Yep.
Okay. Where's that little point you had, Kimber?
It's in here.
Yeah. We used to wash points, you know, wash them, clean them up. But we don't do that anymore because now they have a new process. This is like Jurassic Park. If there's any blood on the point, they can find out what the DNA of the blood is, and they can tell what animal the point killed. So we don't clean these anymore. This one's pretty clean already. But get a shot of that little fella. It almost looks like a foundry glass, this particular church. Somebody told me the name of it once, and I can't recall what it is. But look how tiny. They used to think that these little tiny points were like little bird points, but if you notice the old drawings of the when they were hunting the buffalo on the prairie, the Indian always rides up behind the buffalo. He shoots that arrow, that little bitty arrow, in behind the rib cage, and it goes right up through, and they can be quite deadly, even though they're small. Most of the points we find here that are relevant to the site are very tiny, and yet they had very good flint and obsidian sources, so they must have just liked the little ones. If you find larger ones, they're usually later. This Pueblo, by the way, is about, like I say, 800 AD to about 1380. And they made ceramics here to trade out. It was a big trade center. We're right on the main Pacheco trade routes. And you can see the stabilization they're doing. They'll cap all these walls. There's an interesting feature on the other side of this wall. It's little calendar marks. We'll go through Jeff's doorway here. This North Pueblo was badly damaged by looting. And a lot of what we're doing now is taking off overburden areas, finding the disturbed areas. And as soon as we find a level, then we stop, stabilize. And we wanted to find the ruin that way first before we go any deeper. And a lot of what we're doing is repairing damage from looters. There's a calendar mark. Where are they? Here they are. See these indents in the stone? These are where they would mark the sun's movement through a little niche in the wall. Anyway, that's one theory, or two. Actually, there's two theories out there that say that now. And we found this in room 8. And there's really quite a few of them. There's some here. I think there's some more up here too. Yeah, here's a little one. And there's some more here. So they were marking time by the sun. As soon as people plant crops, you get very aware, you become very aware of the seasons, and that's about the time you start thinking about calendars. And these people grew corns, beans, squash, a myriad of things we'll never know about, but primarily corns, beans, and squash, and peppers too. I want to show you some, I can show you the kiva. There's an interesting zig down here. I don't know if we can get down there. Let's try this way. There's a very Mesoamerican look to the point of the Pueblo, where Jeff is stabilizing right now. Try not to be very careful when you step. This is the east slope outside the Pueblo walls. This is where the burials were. All of the burials on this site were removed about 1900 by an Indian woman using Mexican labor. She terraced the entire east slope and removed all the burials and all the funerary objects, sold all the vessels to Santa Fe dealers, and sold all of the bones to Mexican witches to make potions with. In the early, I think it was about 1984, modern pots hunters came up here and began looking for the burials again. This was before the burial law of '91. And so they knew where they should be, and they started terracing the east slope again. Didn't find any, and they became frustrated and began to chew big holes in the North Pueblo. And a lot of that damage is what we're repairing today. We'll walk around, take a look at this north point. Talking about the burials, I originally trained in physical anthropology, and I would have loved to have seen that material. But nowadays, with the laws as they are, it's actually an advantage not to have burials on the site. They're kind of a nuisance nowadays. This is the northeast point of the Pueblo, and these rim blocks zig in. They not only zig in two-dimensionally, they zig in three-dimensionally because the floors are at different levels. So what happens is the extreme eastern edge has a floor level maybe a meter deeper than you can see on the outside wall, and then this room's a little higher, and then a little higher. And this little zig, we don't know if it goes all the way around the north point yet, but it certainly has that feature to this point, and we assume that it goes all the way around. So the point of this Pueblo was very, very planned. It might even go all the way down to just a single room, probably the mayor's house. This North Pueblo is very, very old. This section in particular is 1000 AD, even older. You can see a sealed doorway here in room 9. This means that at one time, these two rooms were used contemporaneously. Then probably, I don't know, maybe the daughter got married, they didn't like the son-in-law, so they walled up the entrance between the two. But you'll see a lot of reconstruction, modification, walls that used to be exterior walls added to, they become interior walls, and buildings on top of buildings up here, because this was occupied for 8 centuries. It's a long time. There's a couple of kivas we can take a look at. Another kiva in the north. We can walk around this way, it's probably easier. Our purpose is to stabilize every feature on the site. All of these walls will be stabilized. They'll all be preserved. And we'll define the edges, we'll clean it up, define the edges. This has all been chewed up by looters. There's a classic looter crater right here. Take a backhoe, they scoop the center out, and just throw it. They don't screen it. They're looking for large, commercially valuable objects, which are very rare. You have to excavate hundreds of metric tons of material to find one vessel in little pieces and put it together over a year's time. You'll see some of that when we get to the lab. But what we'll do when we excavate this, we will excavate this area, because you kind of know where they threw the stuff. And we will get a bit of provenance off that material. And we will eventually find a level to, either a floor level hopefully, but a level to stop at, and we'll define the walls, find out where they are. This north point is suffered a lot of damage. Let's go take a look at that big kiva I'm telling you about. There really should be more kivas here than we see. We know of 2, but with 800 rooms, you'd think you'd have more kivas than that. Unless some of the larger rooms were used as kivas. And that's what they said down at the Hooper Ranch, which is about 8 miles south of here. And they're write-ups from the late 50s. Now this is a pretty big kiva. We didn't know how big it was. Jeff, I think at the beginning of this year, he knew where the corner was, over where the stake is and the basalt. He knew where the corner of the kiva was. And he wanted to find out how big it was, because there's this big debate in archaeology, who's got the biggest kiva. So he trenched along the wall and was going along real nice, following the outer wall of the kiva. And then a squirrel one day helped him out and dug out the corner for him. And we know now that it's about 15 meters square inside walls, at least one way, at least to the west it's 15 meters. We had a German exchange student up here, and he liked to follow walls. So we had him, he followed the kiva wall toward the north. Now, whoops, there's a wall going in, kind of into the middle. So Jeff speculated that that must be an entrance. Entrances are almost always on the east side. And he said there should be another wall over here, and sure enough, he terraced down and found the other wall. So we really don't know how big it is to the north. It might be much larger than 15 meters square, but this was a pretty big kiva. And this will take many, many years to excavate. Now, initially, we'll just want to find the outside, the parameters of the thing, and then make a decision on where to open test units or how to do that. This is one of the few places in the North Pueblo that we found the bottom. We found the sterile material that was originally here before any humans were here. And it's underneath this kiva wall, which is several meters deep. So the North Pueblo, we have quite a bit more to go yet before we find bottom up there. Jeff mentioned this west wing of the South Pueblo, that low pile of rubble. Well, it does connect to this kiva. It does. The room blocks do come all the way up to this kiva. So do we really have 2 distinct Pueblos? I mean, it looks like the North Pueblo is distinct. The ceramics are distinct. It's earlier, but we do see similar things in the South Pueblo. It looks like there might have been a transition from the North Pueblo to the South Pueblo. It might have been the same people, or at least a few of the same people. And certainly the room block connects. Also, if you look at an aerial photo of the site, there's a perimeter wall that goes all the way around both Pueblos. So there is some sort of continuation. Even though the North was primarily abandoned by 1380, Maybe the north was in such a mess they said, let's just build a whole new Pueblo down here. But it looks like the same group of people in some ways, and in other ways it looks like an entirely different group of people. So we haven't figured that out yet. And we're not even sure if they do connect. Okay, here's a few of the objects, some of the artifacts from Raven site. Raven site having 70 ceramic or 72 ceramic types. And the reason there are so many types of pottery, for one reason, is the temporal depth. You've got 800 years of occupation, so that's a lot of changes in styles. But you also have two different ceramic traditions and all of the trade wares. Raven site potters were making pottery to trade out, and they made an awful lot of pottery. They traded it out by the ton. Certain types really travel quite a distance. They find, for example, St. John's polychrome. There's a St. John's black on red up top there. They find St. John's as far east as Ohio. And they were trading so much that it doesn't really look like they had to do much hunting. We find very few points, very little evidence of other activities. They were primarily making pottery, especially in the North Pueblo. See all the little ladles, dippers, everything from little soup spoons all the way up to big water dippers. And you see several changes in ceramic style even there. These little Pueblo models are fun. These little 3-story models of a Pueblo room. Those are the only 2 in the world. We found one on the floor of room 7, and the other one was plowed up by the rancher when he was doing his alfalfa. They're a little model of a 3-story Pueblo room. I teased that maybe the tax collector wore it around his neck, you know, he would have praised the property with the thing. We find a lot of crystals, an inordinate amount of crystals, usually very worn. Looks like they were trading or handling them or maybe praying with them or something. Hematite, iron, ground into many, many forms. Not smelted, just ground from the natural form. And they were using it for the red pigment you see on some of the pottery. There are fetishes, shell bracelets traded all the way from California up through the whole calm to this area. And jewelry too. Not too much turquoise, a little bit of turquoise. It was apparently either they took it with them or it was quite rare around here, but they did have a little bit of turquoise. We find it once in a while and inlaid sometimes on bone. See some of the points and bone tools. Little fish hook. This is a fascinating little piece, this little fish hook. You never find those in the Southwest. And in the East, they're very, very late. To find a fish hook here is quite unusual. Many of these points are made from petrified wood. A lot of obsidian points. They're trying to date using obsidian hydration, but it isn't. I haven't seen any very good dates yet. Most of the points, these are pretty classic from this Pueblo. Most of them are very small that we find here. Some of the bone implements, we'll see some more of these as we go in the lab. This fancy carved one is called an eardrop, like an earring. These are flutes or little whistles. These drilled antler pieces, they don't really know what those are. There's a lot of theory about them, but no one's come up with a good answer yet. Some of the old cowboys around here say those are used for making rope or pulling cordage through, and that's about the best theory I've heard. This is a scapula of an antelope that's been modified for a scraper. It's now a scraper for scraping the pottery. When they're performing the pottery, they'll scrape out the coils in the pottery. See how they use the femur of the antelope, and they would cut off bone rings. And these are actually finger rings. We find them that were carved and worn as finger rings. There are also other ornamentation too they would make from bone. Bone was a good material to work with, and it preserves so beautifully here. The pH of the soil is virtually neutral here. It's well drained. So bone, shell, we even find turkey egg shells. That's how well the preservation is. Sometimes these middens, when we're excavating trash middens, like we're talking about in room 30, they actually smell like garbage when you're going through them. That's how well preserved it is. We'll move around to the lab. I think Kimber's near sanding on a vessel. Now this is the lab. This is where everything comes down from the site. It comes down in a little dirty grid bag. Do we have a dirty one, Kim? Oh, here, not really. Is a dirty one someplace? Or have you cleaned them all already?
Not all of them.
Here's a bag full of cultural material from room 38 from the surface. You see quite a bit of antelope bone. And the little vials, they'll put little things in the vial that are a little more delicate. charcoal, of course, gets a vial because you get a carbon date. You don't want to touch that. That's what this is. So I'm not going to touch it because the lanolin from my fingers will get in there and could disturb the date. But it comes down in these little dirty bags like this, and then it's cleaned and put in a rack. Just lightly cleaned. Under cleaning is better than over cleaning. In archaeology, you can see they don't really clean it very much. Just rinse it off a little bit. Isolate out the faunal material, the lithic, the ceramic, and there's some charcoal samples. And from here, once the entire room is finished, to whatever level we decide to stop at, usually a floor level, we then lay it out on the lab tables. And this was just finished. In fact, this morning, there were all of the grid. Oh, look at the little fetish.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice? I didn't see him.
Yeah,
Oh, that's darling. Look at that little fella. We find these little fetishes once in a while. That's a nice one. That'll wind up in the museum. That's a beauty. Yeah, but anyway, we lay them all out by grid, and then we photograph them by grid. And then we do the lithic analysis, the faunal analysis, the floral analysis, the ceramic analysis. And that's what I have to do today, is I have to try to name all of these little types of ceramics. In other words, and assign a date to them. That, for example, is Tularosa 12 to 1300 AD. And so is that. This one is probably, it's a northern type, dates to around reserve material, which is a little earlier than Tularosa. And I'm not going to try to type just that little bit right there, because I'll make a mistake. Now that's a Heshatuthla. That's got the glazeware in it. That dates to about 1300, 1310, maybe a little later. But I'll go through and I'll type all of these by grid. And that all goes on a computer database, and then you write the room up about what you found in the room. And you can see there's a little artifact here. There's a beer can. That tells me that room was disturbed. That was one that the looters churned up. So I'm not going to see much of a level change here. I'm just going to see pretty much probably all mixed together. But even though it's mixed together, you can still date the room. This is a different room. This is room 32. Now we've already removed all of the lithic, all of the faunal, all of the floral. That's all been filed away. And we've already done all the analysis and photographed it. So now we can begin to glue the pieces together. And this is sort of like taking 250,000 jigsaw puzzles, breaking it, mixing them all up, throwing away a handful of pieces here and there, burying them for 1,000 years, digging them up, washing them off, and trying to put the puzzle back together without a picture to look at. And it's a three-dimensional puzzle, and it's temporally three-dimensional also, or fourth-dimensional. But even though this room was churned up by looters, this was another one that was disturbed in the North Pueblo, I can still date the room because I have a lot of reserve black and white material. This dates from about 900 to about 1100 AD. In fact, right at 1100 with this stuff, they started putting little white dots and little fingers painting smears on the outside. This is exactly 1100, within 20 years. It's an index artifact. Now, I see a lot of early types here. I do see some later ones. I see a little Tularosa, but that got mixed from the top because this room was disturbed. This one had a beer can in it too. Different type of beer, so maybe a different looter. Well, that's something that's real evidence, you know. There's also polychromes in the room, multicolored ceramics. Polychrome means at least 3 colors. This one, for example, is a red vessel, basically, with black paint on the inside, but it has wide smeary paint on the outside. And this wide smeary paint is very similar to the wide smeary finger dot paint we saw in the reserve material. It's early, because later on these lines start to get finer. You find one here like this. They start to get narrower. This is the earlier type, this is the later type. This is Wingate poly, this is St. John's. And the St. John's, even the St. John's I see in this room, though, is early. It's kind of sloppy. Later on, these lines get much nicer. So that's probably 1175 at best. So this room dates for about 1050 to 1100. The floor, the actual floor of this room. Now there's newer stuff that got churned into it from the surface, but you can still date it about 1050. A lot of the ceramics, like I said, Ravenside has 70 ceramic types, and I've got to run over here and get some gloves on. Everything we do in the lab is reversible. You don't want to ever do anything to an artifact that will change the artifact or will contaminate the artifact or that you can't reverse. and that includes display too. You want to be very careful when you display objects. Kimber is doing a little plaster work on this. What type is this one? Yeah, that's a St. John's black on red. Yeah. And if that had a little white paint on the outside, that would be a St. John's polychrome. In fact, it does have white paint on the outside, very faint. So that's a St. John's polychrome bowl. And what she's doing, she's adding the plaster fill where the pieces are missing. We do that to strengthen the vessel, and if you're going to display the vessel, it looks a little nicer. Now, we can always remove this plaster simply by soaking the vessel in water overnight. The plaster weakens, falls off, and if we find those pieces, then we can add those back in. That includes the gluing we do. In fact, a lot of these you see glued are very, they're not glued together right. That's not correct. We're not worried about that because we'll take it apart and do it all over again when we find a little more of it. But in the meantime, that's a Wingate poly. Very early one, very nice. You can see the transition. They started putting the many colors on the inside of the pottery. This is later. This is, well, it's probably still a St. John's. But they started putting, could be, some people would call it a Cedar Creek, I guess. You can see, you can learn a lot from the pottery, temporally. There's changes in form. These are all the same type of vessel. Very late, by the way. This stuff wasn't even made till 1475, 1450. They're debating that, but that's those days. I'll go by Woodbury. The vessel started out very round, very globular. And then they started to develop a shoulder, almost like a Gila shoulder. You'll see the Salado people do. And eventually then they become a very saucer-shaped, very Hopi looking, really, very Jetidal looking. They start to get this very wide shoulder. But these are all the same type of vessel. On some of the restoration, you see the plaster work Kimber's doing. Sometimes it's corrugated, so you can't just put in plain plaster. So we make a little mold on a do you have a mold over there? Got an alginate mold? What we'll do is we go over to a good side of the vessel, make a cast of that, then lay that here, then fill from the inside, and recreate the corrugations that we're missing in the vessel. Here's some alginate. That one's probably shot anyway, isn't it? This is a dental alginate. This is the same thing the dentist uses to cast your teeth. And it smells pretty too. It smells like mint. And we'll make these little molds and then recreate these missing pieces on this vessel. Somebody did a very good job on it. Did I do this or did somebody else do this? Did Barb do this one? She did a good job on that. Okay, a little more work to do on it. I want to show you some of the smaller objects. Everybody's interested in the ceramics, but there's so much else. There's so many little tiny objects like that little fetish we saw. These are, I should mention these. These are 4-mile polychromes. And these, I really get excited when we find one of these because these have symbols on them we can read. They started around 1325. They go through about 1380. Very brief period of time. The potters at Ravenside began to put symbols on here that we can make sense of. This outside, for example, is the parallel lines are earth-land, and the dots are water. This is rain falling to the earth on the outside. Around the rim inside, there's little water dots and rain clouds. And this little circle dot in the center might also be water, rain. Mesoamerica uses one just like that. But 4 miles, I get excited because we see symbols we can read on these, and some other types from here, but primarily 4 miles. We see it on a little bit on some other ones. Some of these Matsakis have things we can read. Let's back up and take a look at some tools. These are deer ulna, or actually antelope ulna awls. Say that 9 times fast. You know? But they love to make this tool out of this particular bone. And look at the preservation on that. Looks like it was made yesterday. I think it's 800 years old. They love to make this particular tool. They sharpen this into a point. It's probably for weaving baskets or weaving matting. But it has a perfect little place here for your finger. That particular bone does. That's natural. That's the little elbow joint of the antelope. And when you looked at that drawer a second ago, remember every 2 of those is an antelope. So you're seeing really quite a large number of antelope killed. They're probably using game drive methods. And that's not all we have. That's just all that are isolated in this way. We probably have 5 times that many from here. Shaft straighteners, shaft abraders. When you're making the arrow shaft, you're straightening the shaft, you're sanding the bark off. That's what these are, different grits and grades. And archaeologists like to classify things, so then we have high profile. And these were always heated. The basalt ones were heated up, so obviously they're using them hot. And then we have pebble type, like a river cobble. And then there's always the guy who's got to have the V8 Deluxe extended warranty model. So you find some nut making this. That's just a big fancy one. Does the same thing though. Does the same job. Three grooves, no waiting. You know, he can do 3 arrows at once, I guess. All of this material will be here, curated forever. It's a very climate-controlled building, and everything stays here. And the research comes from here. We do loan. Well, like I think right now, Miles has some of our faunal material. He's doing research on. This is great. If you can get the glare off that glass. Can you on that? This is a painted sandstone tabletta, or tablet. And it was found on the floor, splattered throughout the floor of room 27. It has 2 rain clouds on top. 4 units of falling rain, of course, because 4 is the magic number in Pueblo mythology. Little flight icon on top. Rainbow, which is the pathway of the warrior twins. Little squiggle here is migration or movement. The T-shaped things like the T-shaped doorways at Chaco Canyon, and the ones we saw in the Pueblo models. The T-shaped doorway is not a pragmatic doorway. It's done that way, leaving the little gap. It lets the spirit go in and out of the building or in or out of the pottery vessel if it's a spirit break in a vessel. This little break is the same thing. Lets the spirit emerge, pass through. So it's talking about going from this realm to this realm. This is really quite a nice artifact. I've never seen one of these in a collection except for an old photograph of one of the trading posts at Zuni. Had a whole roll of those, one of the old photos. Here's some turkey bone flutes. Get that out of there. These are little whistles, little flutes, made from turkey femurs. And they're 800 years old, and they still play. There's a switch end. I think I have the half note here, too, someplace. There it is. That's a black key, I guess. You get an idea of the jigsaw puzzle. We have truckloads like this from the trash bins, etc. And these will all go together. Not 2 whole vessels because they use pottery, they reground it for temper, etc. But that's an idea of the puzzle. And what we do is we type them. We'll separate them all by type and then begin the assemblage. Let's see what we have here. This is a fun drawer. See some ground turquoise. This is for, they were getting pigment off here, just like on this tabletta you saw with the blue sky. This is where they got the blue. And there's hematite in here too, the iron. And they were grinding that, getting the red. Also used for the pigments on the vessel. So is turquoise. We have gaming pieces. Let me find some little gaming pieces. Think of these as dice. What these are, they're pieces of broken pottery that they ground, modified, and you throw 5 or 6 of these, and you have, you know, painted up or painted not up, and gamble for arrows, etc. This is a fun piece right here. What do you think that is? I'll give you a hint. It's a nose. It's a clay nose. Very low fired, if fired at all. I think it's just very low fired. Has red ochre on the inside, nostrils. And it was threaded onto the center of a mask. So they must have had, obviously they had Halloween, right? Okay. These drawers are just, the site is just layered with material, and there's so much we could look at. Axes, where are the axes? Stone axes. When I look at these tool assemblages, it reminds me of when I look in my screwdriver drawer. You know, you pull your screwdriver drawer open, there's like 9 different kinds or 15 different kinds of screwdrivers. But you need that many, you know. This is probably a little loom weight. Holding cord down on a loom. This is a nice one. This is going to be in the next book. This was broken. It's a nice axe, and they broke this bottom part out accidentally. But they rehafted it anyway. You see where it's worn in here? They went ahead and used it anyway. Find a lot of them broken. This one's probably from the construction level of the floor of a room. You know, stuff that you fill in when you're building. You know, you fill the trench up around. And this is an old broken axe. Somebody figured it was had seen its better days, so they threw it away. Find a lot of this stuff in the trash middens. Here's another one. This one has been, somebody got mad at their wife with that one, I'll tell you. That's seen some better days. A lot of times they'll rework these, though. They'll make other tools out of them. Oh. Yeah, what else could we cover? We have faunal, we have, these are some nice pieces. Let me get a couple of these down. It's a little cloth bag. It's very fine weave. I don't know if you can get close enough to see the weave on that. I'll try to hold very still. But they grew cotton. They had cotton. And they wove fabric as fine as my shirt. And this little bag was woven out of cotton, and it was full of turquoise powder. And the only reason it survived preservation is because it was hanging on a cedar post in the center of the room. The center of the post was still there. Yeah, the post was still there, and it was hanging on this post. And the cedar preserved the cotton. And you get a very good example of how fine the weaving was. You have to remember, when we excavate a room, you see just a fragment of what really happened there. You know, you don't get any of the customs or ceremonies or songs or poems or stories. Here's some cordage, some woven cordage. There's a good little area right there you can see. Almost looks like yarn, doesn't it? Except they didn't have sheep, so it couldn't be yarn. But you can see the cordage. This was hanging on it was in a little niche in room 21. It's unusual to find fabric. You can, but it's very few and far between. You get a shot of that? Yeah. Okay. We're talking about this book, Talking Pots. What this does is it translates the symbols on ceramics. And you can get this Walton's Dalton's.
Who is the author of that book?
Well, I know this guy. He's kind of a character. But I expected, a lot of academic flack when I wrote this, because there were about 5 symbols that they had that they accepted as meaningful before we excavated this vessel, and then we wound up with about a dozen. But the academic flack really hasn't happened that much. They're just starting to re-look at things and re-examine things, so it's worked out very nicely. But anyway, this came out just this year, and it happened because we found this vessel in 1990. And it's a 4-mile polychrome, dates from about 1325 to 1380. And it's a Thunderbird. We had a nice Thunderbird. There's his head, and there's his eyes. Now, we didn't know what this thing behind the bird was or the thing below the bird. But he has a cloud wing. That unilateral terrace unit is a cloud. And Thunderbirds often have cloud wings. They clap their wings and make the thunder, according to Zuni lore. They also often have arrow points incorporated into the bird. This has an arrow point head. A lot of times the body of the bird is an arrow point. This one has an arrow point head. That arrow point's repeated in the back of the head. That's a key sign or determinative. That's like saying a very, very pretty girl, a very, very powerful Thunderbird. The word ho-ho-kam means all used up in Pima. Ho-kam is used up. That's a phonetic element. But we didn't know what these things were behind or below the bird. Here's behind the bird. Now the dots are water or wet, but we didn't know what this was, and we didn't know what this was until we found this in the literature. This is a vessel excavated by Jesse Walter Fuchs in 1895 from up by Winslow. And this Thunderbird, notice the dots on the beak just like ours, this Thunderbird is dragging a string of rain clouds. Well, we know those are rain clouds. Right triangles are either clouds or mountains. These have the little flight icons, so they're rain clouds. Thunderbird is bringing rain. Well, our bird is dragging this thing. That's a rain streamer. That's probably the earliest rain streamer known. There it is. It's kind of a right angle thing, which might mean something, but it's definitely a rain streamer. You still see them on Athabascan weavings. Little rainbow coming out of the posterior of animals. And the dots are water falling rain. But what are these birds bringing rain to? What's this thing? They're bringing rain to something. This is the Pueblo. This thing gave us 5 words. There's the hill, there's human-controlled created space, house, garden, plaza. Only humankind makes squares and rectangles. Nature doesn't make very many squares and rectangles, the exception of salt crystals and fluoride crystals. The interlocked terraced units, that's house marriage. That's sort of the coupling of man-woman marriage, and that equates to the single-family dwelling. Parallel lines outside the village, those are the earth, land, or crops. Those are irrigated cultigens. If you irrigate, you have to irrigate in a straight line. And these people irrigated and they planted, and these are the crops. Now let's look at the other one. Same thing. There's a hill, there's the human-created space, there's the interlocked terraced units, and there's the earth land around the crops around the village. They gave us 5 words. And we started looking for other ones in the collections, and sure enough, we started finding quite a few. There's the Pueblo, there's the hill, human-controlled created space, interlocked terrace units, house marriage, and the parallel lines, the earth land, crops around the village. Here's another one. There's the hill, and this human-created space is created by the interlocking of the terraced units, and then the earth land lines run through the whole thing. Symbol changes a little bit with distance from the source and over time. Here's one without the earth land lines, and only a big single cloud unit in the center. That's probably a place name. That's probably like Cloud Pueblo. They called these pueblos prehistorically by name. They didn't say, oh, the Pueblo over the ridge. They said, you know, New York, Baltimore, Philadelphia, Ravenside. So this was probably Cloud Pueblo. Here's one without the hill. Has all the other elements but doesn't have the hill. Well, where this vessel was excavated, there was no hill. The Pueblo was built on a floodplain. There's 2 more side by side. Here's a little bitty one. But that sherd is that big. Just a little tiny sherd. They didn't have room to put little interlocked terraced units in there, so they just put more than 1, 3 dots. And there is another house form that uses the dot to indicate the roof entrance of the house. This is a very early vessel. This is reserved black and white. It predates most of the symbolism we see on ceramics. In other words, they might have been using symbolism, but they didn't put much of it on ceramics until about 1300. And this one might predate their use of symbols on ceramics, although it is a great house marriage unit. Most pottery vessels do not have meaningful symbols on them. Most pottery vessels are plaids and paisleys. 99.9% of them are plaids and paisleys. Very few have meaningful symbols. It appears that when the trading was real big here, they were making a lot of pottery to trade out. They then started putting meaningful stories and symbols on the pottery, probably to make them trade better. It's like trying to invent the better t-shirt with the funniest slogan. It trades better, people buy it better. But this probably predates a lot of the meaningful symbolism on ceramics. This is an academically accepted glyph. Anybody know what that one is? Okay. What's 1? 2 arrow points. That's war. That's war. That's virtually worldwide. Here's a little Pueblo glyph with an arrow point sticking in it. What does that mean? You got a Pueblo and there's an arrow point sticking in there. It means it's under attack. They're having some problems here. Here's 2 Pueblos. There's a Pueblo glyph and there's a Pueblo glyph. And this big hourglass thing in the center, minus the circle cross, is what? What's the big hourglass? I'll give you a hint. Whoop. It's an arrow point. There's 2 arrow points touching. That's war. And the circle cross, a lot of times you'll see a dot in each quadrant. That's probably divided. Your modern division symbol does the same thing. It has a dot and a line in between, 2 dots and a line in between. That's very graphic. 2 Pueblos divided by war. Maybe. The thing to remember when you're trying to do this and you're excavating, now we had about 6 symbols that made sense. Swastika, checkerboard, a few others. Now we have 12. Well, how many did they really have? You know, when you excavate the site, up the site, you saw the little bits of bone and little bits of flint. You know, and what percentage of the entire culture are we really getting to see? You know, 1%? 1/10 of 1%? 1/10 of 1/10,000th of 1%? These people had trade unions, growers' associations, marriage customs, songs, poems, stories, a myriad of things that we will never find by digging up little bits of flint, etc. We only get a very, very tiny, tiny percentage of the total cultural index. I would say 1/10 of 1/100,000th of 1%, a very small amount. And if we have 12 symbols that we can read, well then how many did they have? Did they have 1,200? 120? If they had 300, that's a written language. That's a logographic language. And we already are starting to see key signs slide in, determinatives slide in, little phonetic things slide into the logographic language. And it is a language. You start to see more of it. You can imagine what they were doing on skins and weavings and other things that didn't survive preservation. We're just fortunate that they stuck some on ceramics that we get a chance to see now in the 20th century.
James, thank you very, very much for having us today.
Pleasure having you and your team here today.
What kind of programs do you have available for someone that might be interested in coming and spending some time with you?
You can come for 1 day, 2, 3, a week. Some people come for a month. The programs, what'll happen is if you're here even just for one day, you will excavate with an archaeologist at your elbow. And all of the programs support the science. What'll happen is if you come for 2 or 3 days, you'll survey. You'll go out in the canyon, survey the petroglyph areas. We have horseback riding. You'll excavate, work in the lab. Lynn just came down from the site. She's got her bag of material from today. She'll clean that material, and she was actually going to finish the restoration on the vessel that Kimber was working on in the lab. And the programs, the rates on the programs vary. We have, rates are lower for kids, kids groups, scout groups, school groups. We have a school group coming in tomorrow, and they'll be here for a week. And those young people will get about a semester of college in 7 days when they're out here, because they're going to be tested pretty heavily and work pretty hard. But it's they do learn something while they're here too.
Fantastic. Tell people how they can get in touch with you.
Well, you can write to the White Mountain Archaeological Center. That's HC 30, Henry Charlie 30, St. John's, Arizona. The zip is 85936. Or you can call and make reservations. The area code is 602. The number is 333-5857. And we're open 7 days a week. We're open May 1 through October 17th. 7 days a week. You can come for a tour too if you like, and lunch or whatever. We have different programs for different age groups. We take about the age 9 and up, 9 years old and up. And I think the oldest we ever had was 90, and her name was Jane. And she was in the South Pueblo excavating on a floor level, and she found an intact, well, it was broken, but it was in situ, vessel sitting there, and I had to almost carry her off the hill at 6:30. She didn't want to come down. She wanted to stay right there and finish dusting that out. The excavation, I like the lab work personally. I like finding the pieces and putting the pieces of the puzzle together. A lot of people like excavating. If you're here a week, you really choose what you want to do.
Well, that's great. Again, I want to say
thank
it's
you
a
for coming
pleasure
today.
being here with you, and I think a lot of people are going to take you up on this.
I hope they do, because that means we have more work done, more science done, more analysis done.